Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Plate. I'm Jake Albie, and I'm here with Ali Gonzalez. And today we're going to be talking about vegetarians and how things have changed over time and looking at the food system, like restaurants, to not only see what people's options are, but like what's the impact of the food that you're eating. Ali?
Well, actually, before we even get into the type of food that we're eating as vegetarians, I want to talk about what type of vegetarians there are out there. What does it mean to be a vegetarian? How do they identify as being a vegetarian? I mean, there's so many different types of vegetarians out there. I lost track. Now, I remember growing up in the 80s, especially the 90s when I started getting into this industry, that vegetarians were very passionate about eating vegetarian style foods. They were vegans. There were some that would eat dairy and cheese, and they listed their reasons why. Nowadays, I'm confused about vegetarians at all. What is their platform? What do they stand for? Is it political? Is it for health reasons? What does it stand for? Because what I'm seeing from vegetarians working in the restaurant industry doesn't seem like a vegetarian, because I feel like they're eating junk food. Vegetarians are actually gaining weight now. Before, they were skinny, they were losing weight, they actually were fit. Healthy, well, that depends on that type of vegetarian and what they were eating and what kind of supplements, because vegetarians need iron, they need omega-3s, they need to make sure they have vitamin B12. And if you're just eating vegetables and you're not eating certain types of legumes, some types of beans and lentils and chickpeas, you're losing those vitamins unless you're taking vitamin supplements. And we don't even know if a lot of those are, approved by the FDA. Are they good for you? Are you passing them through when you're eating them, taking them actually? So do you have any thoughts on this? Have you seen a difference growing up? Do you have friends that are vegetarians, Jake? I mean, what is your take on all this?
I mean, I think the first time I really remember interacting with it the most was in college and being a swimmer, because we had someone who was a vegetarian just because they grew up that way. And then I knew someone else that was a vegetarian because for health reasons, like it had to do with that they were sick, so they just cut out a lot of different foods. This was kind of funny because I also learned about like peanut allergies, for example, right? How like people not interact with peanut allergies or peanuts as much, getting peanut allergies. So it's just really interesting to kind of see the dynamic. But for most of the perspective I saw, like vegetarian was less of a conscious ideology, I would say, than vegans were. Like vegans were the hardcore, like nothing from an animal. Where when I was talking to vegetarians, that was actually the first time I remember someone that I knew pretty well that was in my year and stuff. And so because we swam together, I saw her a lot. And I remember her talking about having to take vitamins. So like for me, that was more the perspective that I got out of it, was like, it wasn't, I saw a lot less of the ideological side, I felt like, and I saw a lot more of the health side and the acknowledgement of like, hey, I know I'm missing out on some of these things. And I would say as I've gotten older, what I see more is maybe a deeper understanding of food. So some vegetarians recognize, like, if I need iron, I need to eat beets. But the bigger thing that I think I've seen over time is, like, if you are going to go down the vegan and vegetarian route, it's very expensive. It's kind of like a luxury diet because you have to eat so much more. It's not even about the vitamins. It's just getting the right amount of nutrients. So it's not that it's necessarily bad, but like I said, it's always been more for health than it has been for a choice. But when it comes to a choice, that I associate a lot more with veganism.
I don't think the cost mattered back 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. In fact, it was cheaper to be a vegetarian vegan. And nowadays, it's taken a different path. Mm-hmm. Because again, vegetables are just as expensive as meat is. And to buy processed substitutes, that they're putting out there, this Beyond Meat and all these nut cheeses, is more expensive than you would buy regular cheeses, or the same price as beef. So when you go into a restaurant, it seems like the vegetarian entrees are just as much as the regular entrees, when before it was a lot cheaper. And I worked and I went to culinary school in the Bay Area, San Francisco, California. And then I worked in Santa Cruz. And Santa Cruz, I don't know if you heard of the University of Santa Cruz, but there was a lot of people from across the United States that would go there, and a lot of humanitarians, let's just say. So a lot of them would come into the restaurant that I was running downtown Santa Cruz. It was called Memphis Minis. And I had gumbo on there. So it was a very hearty dish over wild rice. I also had black eyed peas over rice also, because it was a Southern Cajun Creole place. And you can get cornbread. And the great thing about that is that I can custom make way before special vegetarian options. And I would go to the farmer's market before there was real farmer's markets where chefs would actually go to anywhere, because when I would go buy a case of tomatoes and green beans, and I'd buy a whole case instead of a little bag or a pound, the farmers would ask me, we don't know what to charge. We don't sell them by the cases. So again, I was doing that way before that the movement started back in the early 90s. But the vegetarians were very, very obsessed and concerned about their eating habits, what they ate. Anyone that they associated around them had to be vegetarian also. It was very hard to get along with them because they were so passionate about it, and they didn't want you to hurt an animal. They didn't want to kill animals. They had a mindset to why they were eating vegetarians versus now. And this is how I've seen it change. Now I don't know what a vegetarian is. What I mean by that is that I know you're eating vegetarian food, but I feel that they're eating all junk food. And I know there's the exception to the rule. There are those that are out there, but it's not the same as it was 20, 30 years ago. And I don't know if you agree with me with that or not.
No, I mean, I do, because something that we've talked about outside of this particular podcast is that, you know, like there are political food movements, and then there's religious food movements and health food movements. And I think what happened was initially, like, I remember growing up and seeing vegetarian and vegans as like exactly that. It's like, oh, I don't want to eat meat. I don't want to hurt animals and things like that. One actually thing I want to throw out there too is maybe part of the reason why they were skinnier is because they were eating less, because there were like less options. So there's only so much food you can eat. So it was definitely more of like a discipline, something you kind of have to dedicate yourself to, where now obviously there's a lot more options. But what I would say is that, like, to me, it feels like it's transformed from like, I'm not eating this food because I respect animals, to being like, I know just for myself, the thing that I've gone through was that I've had issues with cholesterol and some other different things like that. So I find myself wanting to eat like a more plant forward diet. And I feel like I see a lot more of that too, where like there's less vegan and vegetarian, but there's more promotion on like, hey, eat these foods this way because they're healthier. So, you know, not as much of like completely getting rid of things. And I think that also had to do with the fact that like you started hearing about how many vitamins people have to take. Like, at what point is it not better just to eat the food than it is to get the vitamins? So, and this is purely subjective, just my experience, not as much, you know. So I would agree with you that it's transformed, but I think it's because like health has blown up so much and we feel like we know so much more now, where like that's why I don't feel like the political stuff is as heavy, if that makes sense.
I think it's more creative now than back then. I remember that a lot of chefs and cooks used to just get really mad when catering came in or people came in and they didn't have vegetarian meals on the menus. A lot of places did not have it. And somebody would say, I'm vegetarian, can I not get meat in this or that? And the cooks in the back of the house were like, oh boy, man, they'd be cussing in the back and saying, they'd be like, oh my God, so what are we going to give them? So they just throw some pasta together with some vegetables. So they didn't really buy tofu for that. They would give them a vegetable plate for the vegetarian. And it was really boring food. So every time the vegetarian went out to eat, they had to eat pasta. They had to eat grilled vegetables. And it wasn't so creative. Nowadays, you're going to have miso rubbed vegetables. You're going to have stir fries and noodles and you know, you're going to have grilled eggplant layered with tomatoes and herbs with, and if you're not, they're going to find a vegan cheese inside of it, and maybe a butternut squash sauce on the bottom of it. They're doing things with pickled beets. So you're going to see all this creativity nowadays that chefs are doing, and they're making these wonderful nut cheeses and you know, and soy products that they're using. And I think it's very, very innovative that they're really going after the vegetarians this way and helping them. I actually, on my menus, no matter where I work now or a consultant, I put a section just for vegetarians. This way, they're not looking through the whole menu. And I'm making sure that I'm not buying these Beyond Meats and these, let's just say, these synthetic vegetarian meat products. I'll use chickpeas. I'll use something that's a little bit more healthier and unprocessed. Versus now you started seeing all the fast food restaurants bringing on these imitation meat burgers, which are not good for you.
Actually, it's kind of funny. An anecdote I have about that was talking to a friend who, like, they were vegan for a while, and I think they're mostly pescatarian at home, or, like every once in a while they may have meat at home, but it's not like beef, or pork. It's usually just like lamb. But the point being is, like, they're very conscious of their diet. And so I remember the first time I talked to them about Impossible Burgers, right? I think it was like right when Burger King got it. And they're the ones where I got the idea, like, oh, I want to eat a more plant-forward diet. Like, I don't have to have meat in every single meal, because there's places around the world like that. And so it was funny as I was talking about the Impossible Burger, because I had seen and heard how unhealthy it was. And he goes, oh yeah, I know. He goes, I just prefer, like, it's funny because it's kind of evolved, it feels like, into a preference. And the reason why I bring that up is it's not even just the Impossible Burger. Like, I've looked at the vegetarian part of the menu, and I think what a lot of chefs have caught on to, at least, I can't speak to the vegetarian part, is same thing I deal with web accessibility, where it's like, I can sit here and beat you over the head about how important web accessibility is and how you need to think about everybody, or I could just make it part of what I already do, right? Like, when I give advice, it's just already built in. And I feel like that's what chefs did. Because there's been a number of times where, like, I see someone eating something that's more vegetarian, and I'm like, I would eat that. Like, that looks really, really good. So it's kind of exciting, but it's also weird because, like you said, coming from earlier on when you're seeing it, it's like, oh, it was the boring food. And now it's like a whole section of food that's really exciting. It's kind of like Asian fusion and stuff like that.
When it's like Thai influenced, or
Yeah.
it has a Filipino style flair. The Thai has rice noodles to it. It has tamarind, chili flakes, sugar, and scallions, mustard greens, and bean sprouts. So you get some great, alternative entrees. It has heavy lime flavor and cilantro to it. So you have the freshness also. And it doesn't feel like you're eating the same entree. You'll see Thai pizza out there and cauliflower crust. So there's so many great, wonderful options. But the question is, why are they gaining weight? Why are they unhealthy now? And I'm not talking about unhealthy by being a vegetarian because I'm not eating meat or a protein, a solid protein. Those aren't the vegetarians I'm talking about from 20 years ago. I'm talking about the vegetarians now that are eating. And I was working at a hotel in New Hampshire, and there was 4 or 5 people that were vegetarians, and they had the worst eating habits.
Yeah.
And again, they're gaining weight. When do you see vegetarians being obese? So, and I watch people that stopped eating meat, becoming vegetarians. And I'm asking them, so why are you vegetarian? Because I see you eating quesadillas filled with cheese, dipping it in sour cream, adding pastas with cream, penny vodka. So when you turn around, they're eating processed foods left and right, pizza, big burritos again with guacamole, sour cream, and lots of cheese. This is the same thing over and over and over again. And they're saying, well, I'm vegetarian. Okay, you're a vegetarian, but I don't know what you stand for, because everything you're eating is processed and unhealthy, and you would think it would be something you were completely against.
Well, I think on that note, though, it kind of fits into, like, our perception of how it's like, oh, for a long time, it was like eating vegetarian was just default healthy. But the thing we know that's happened is that a lot of things have become a lot more accessible and become more appealing. And within that, it falls into the bigger thing we've talked about, where, like, large companies like coming in and buying out and adding to their portfolio about, like, oh, okay, like, there's this vegan brand now, right? Or vegetarian brand. Like, we were talking about Lesser Evil because I saw it at Costco. We bought the cheese balls. I don't know if that maybe is a vegetarian brand, but my point being is, like, you have all these health brands getting bought up, and I feel like the same thing happened with the vegetarians, where, like, they were healthier because there wasn't that much, like, I don't know what it's called, like, innovation happening with their food. And now it's like they found ways to capture this market and make it really profitable. But then you have these bigger companies coming in and go, that's great, this is good money, like, we want to expand this sector. But when they say we want to expand it, that's where they start going in and becoming, they bring in the food scientists, like, we need to start pulling things out. So now you have, like, Like, I can't tell you how many times I see yeast extracted stuff. I honestly don't know too much about it. I just know it's in some of the foods I eat. But I did notice, like, it's a lot of the same chemical. I don't want to say chemicals, the same ingredients, more like artificial ingredients. So it's funny because it's like, even for chefs, you've created this market, right? Like, you've created this thing that captures and caters to a group of people that needed attention. But now that it's like actually profitable, okay, we need to go in and we need to raise prices and we need to lower, we need to flip things out to make it more profitable. And that's kind of what I feel like kind of has been, at least feels like it's happening. It's the same thing that's happening to all of us.
Oh, right there, you said it, the less of evil. And people are just saying, well, that's a cool name. So the younger generation is jumping on this, but they're marketing to that name and getting them, because what they're trying to tell them, and now this is where they're going and taking it into something political, when before it wasn't political. It was about your feelings. You didn't care about what other people felt. You cared about what you felt about the animals and the environment. Now it becomes political, because we're telling them, eat this vegetarian vegan product because it's a lesser evil than eating beef, eating cattle. And then they're listing how much water it takes to harvest these crops and these cows and and the chickens and how many gallons of water it takes. And they do this all the time, but they don't also talk about the vegetables that are growing in a GMO soil, and the seeds are with GMOs, and then there's pesticides, and the amount of water it takes to grow those, and the amount of water it does to harvest them, and what kind of wax and chemicals are they spraying when they pick them. They're not giving the actuality out there, where vegetarians, honestly, I believe a lot of them, so the passionate ones, the really good ones out there that believe in something about the environment and not hurting animals, they're actually growing their own vegetables. They actually have a greenhouse. I've seen them, and because they know about the chemicals, so they can actually have something to stand for. Versus now, again, I'm just saying, I don't know. Now, there's an exception to the rule. There's still those handful of people out there fighting for vegetarian, vegan style foods and quality and healthy. Again, like I said, without the pesticides, they're growing their own. But nowadays, I don't see them fighting for it. They settled.
Well, that's where I think, like, for me, that turning point was the Impossible Burger. Like, this recognition of, like, for people that want fast food or some kind of fast food essence, but that's pretty much what it is at the same end of the day. Like, I think it was you who mentioned one of our other conversations about, like, actually the carbon footprint for Impossible, like, meat is actually larger. And it wasn't even about that. I just remember them kind of saying, like, I recognize that it's just as unhealthy, so it's basically vegetarian junk food now. Because I feel like that is the big push that's changed everything, is like there is vegan and vegetarian junk food.
Well, the Impossible Burger is a soy protein. It's a base, but it's highly processed. It's used with, and it's made with engineered oils, which is highly bad for you. It's basically engineered to replicate beef flavor. Mm-hmm. Now, when you go to Beyond Meat's a lot better because it's made with peas, rice, and lentils. It's made with avocado oil. So it mimics meat with plant-based flavors. So you have a better product there, way better than the Impossible meat. But on top of that, they're both bad.
Yeah.
They're both bad. Now, they may be better for the environment, and that's where people are going to fight on, well, I'm doing it for the environment, but health-wise, it's horrible for you. And then you're putting it on a bun that has, whole wheat that was sprayed with whole wheat that was made with GMOs, and then the soil's GMOs. It's sprayed with pesticides. It has seed oil in the bun. The lettuce and tomato also GMOs, pesticides. And they put the dressing on it. Even if it's a vegan meal, it's with the seed oil. So again, what you're eating and putting in your body is not always what you think. If you're fighting for vegetarian foods and the environment and everything else, you can't win these days. So the best way to do it is grow yourself. And a lot of people are going to say, we don't have the time. So what is the alternative? What are we going to do? How do we move forward to eating better and healthier? especially if we are vegetarians, because they're getting sicker. They're not getting healthier.
Okay, I think we have to ask ourselves too, right? Like there's rumors of lab grown meat, right? So like as if the only complaint of why someone is eating vegan or vegetarian is like, I don't want to hurt animals. And it's like, okay, but now we have lab created food. Like, does that mean you'll start eating that food? And the other thing too is it kind of makes you wonder is like, is that what Beyond Meat, Impossible Burgers? I mean, I'm being a little bit conspiracy theory here, so I don't think they're actually connected. But it's kind of funny because you start to look at it and it's like we are starting to see different ways that people want to like manufacture food. So like if we start manufacturing food that has less of an impact on the environment, will people be okay starting to eat that because they can eat with a better conscience? But then the offset that we've seen with things like lab created stuff is like, okay, but then you're not getting the full amount of nutrients. It's just still GMOs, right? Like to me, the biggest issue with GMOs really is that like someone put it best. I forget where I heard it, but it's like America's done a great job making sure that it could feed everybody. I know not everybody gets fed, but like the reality is we could do it because of GMOs. Like food is accessible to everyone, but the sacrifice was taking away nutrients. So as we go farther and farther down this, like I said, the first tying this all back to my original question is if you could eat meat and vegetables and stuff and not have any impact on the environment, would you feel okay eating it, even if you still have to sacrifice that bit of nutrients to get it? Does it make sense?
I think it's every individual's preference. The thought of me eating lab created meat makes me sick.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I don't like the idea of it.
The idea, I would want to vomit. I would throw it away. I don't want the lab created meat. And, you know, our government needs to start passing laws that they need to stamp this. They need to tell everyone what they're eating, but they're not going to. I mean, when you research in the stores, and if vegetarians are eating macaroni and cheese, there's phthalates in it. There's plastic. You know, when you get the Parmesan cheese, there's wood pulp, there's food starch. But they don't, the real olive oils that you see in the jars in the store, they're fake seed oils with chlorophyll. So what is it that we're eating so that we can eat healthier? And if we have a lifestyle, I'm completely against it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a humanitarian. I love animals, absolutely love them. I was raising chickens and I loved them so much. I would sit outside, talk to them, feed them. I could never hurt them. You know, never hurt them. But I'll eat chicken as long as I'm not killing them and doing it. I know that's conflicting to a lot of vegetarians. How dare you say that? But listen, that's how I feel. That's my preference, and I have the right to feel that way. But I would never hurt an animal. But unfortunately, behind the scenes, it's going to happen. But when it comes to all this lab created food, and there's salmon gel. There's where they have broken pieces of salmon and they put them together, and people don't know. So, you know, again, what does it mean for us to have a preference of style of food and what we eat out there if we don't know what we're eating? If that makes sense.
So I think it does, because it kind of reminds me, like I got on this kick for a while. I was watching Meteor with Steve Rinella. I know he's got like a podcast too, but it's just really interesting because you hear how him and some of these hunters talk about like conservation and stuff. And I just want to bring up the point that like you can care about the environment and still eat meat and do some of the other stuff. And it's okay if people don't want to because of the impact, but it feels like what makes a lot of people upset when it comes to food, and our whole motivation of starting this podcast was food fraud, was like not really knowing what's in our food. Like that's kind of what scared me about lab created, is like I saw it because don't know if it's true or not, but there's articles out there right now that basically they're already testing lab created stuff. They put it on the packaging, but it's super subtle where you can't see it. It's kind of like when they passed that law where where there was like a barrier, not a barrier, there was like a certain amount of GMOs that are sensed in the food. It has to be labeled, right? And there was an argument that's like, well, there was already that on the food. They just have to label it now. Or it was like, okay, or were they adding it? But the question that is really frustrating a lot of people, I think, is like, what's in my food? Like, why am I finding out from Facebook that there's cellulose mixed in my cheese? You know what I mean? Like, I do have a right to know when I'm consuming. And not only that, but like when I'm buying stuff, like, why should I pay the same for lab created meat as regular meat? And I know I'm pulling away from the vegetarian, but that actually brings me back to them in terms of like, I think that's where we're all starting to have a lot of the same problems. You know, like, can a vegetarian really eat healthy if most of the food they have is somehow modified? I'm not even talking about GMOs. I'm talking about like if you get some of these different types of food, like, are they slipping in like filler ingredients to make you feel better about it? You know?
Yeah, and that's where you have to do your research, and you should. And there are those that are passionate enough, they go out of the way to do the research, and they write books on it. There's books out there. There's podcasts. There's trainings out there where you, if you're a vegetarian or you're going through health problems, that you can do that. Now, soy products for that matter, when you're thinking about it, soy started getting a bad rap over 10 years ago. Everyone was posting, do not eat soy, do not eat soy. If you're pregnant, stay away from tofu now, stay away from miso, stay away from all this product, and stay away from soy milk. It's bad for you. Now, that got a bad rap. It really isn't that bad for you. Now, again, if it's ultra processed, no, yes, it's going to be bad for you, but look for the organic, look for the freshly fermented, look for the right product. Don't just go buy anything. That's just, there's certain products out there, and there's certain places you have to go and look and research to find out whether you're going to Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, or, just the regular store down the street. You have to read up on the product. Don't just go pick anything, because I love miso and tofu is really good for you, and you have to find the right brand. And again, I always say go with organic. Fermenting is huge now when it comes down to vegetarians. A lot of them ferment their own foods. They have a lot of stores that have fermented foods, fermented vegetables that are really good for you. And I think you were talking about fermenting a while back with me at a conversation we had.
I make like pickled eggs. I've done fermented pickled eggs, fermented cucumbers. I drink kefir, and I make gingerbread. That's all fermented foods that I eat pure. Kefir I eat every day, but I make it at home.
Yes. And when you think about it, for hundreds and thousands of years, that's what they did. So they would grow. I mean, California wasn't, and Florida was just the sunny states. You have all these states out there that they had the 4 seasons, and the winters froze, below zero. So what did they do? They dry aged meat. They fermented their vegetables. So when they farmed all year, all they did was ferment and have jars in their homes so they could eat all winter, and they wouldn't starve. And it was one of the healthiest things that you could do. So it kept them strong, kept them healthy. So if I was a vegetarian, I'd be looking to fermented. I would look in for other soy products. And if I was going to do vitamins, I would do some research, some higher research. But most of all, I'd create even if I had an apartment, you can still create little green boxes and stuff and put them in your home. If you're very serious about that, because it's not hard to grow something in your home. It's not difficult. Even if you have a little patio, you can put these boxes out there. And I know that it's you don't have the space to grow as much as you need. But again, even in the off seasons, I would grow tomatoes, I would grow basil, and then I'd make pesto, and then I'd make tomato sauce out of the tomatoes, roast the bell peppers, and then I'd freeze them and pull them out and make dishes with them. But there's always alternative ways in figuring out a solution to every problem out there, and not adding on to the problem. And the way we add on to these problems is just going out there and allowing these corporations to market to us, and then we sell out. And that's what we're doing. We're out there buying all these ultra processed vegetarian foods, and that's why you see the obesity that you do now with a lot of the vegetarians.
I think too, another thing that I learned when I was in Santa Fe, and this came from some of the advice that you had for when we were talking about the farmers market stuff, because one thing that I don't know where it's come from, but I've kind of noticed it more and more, is like this idea in America, especially, where we want everything fresh to the point that we literally eat things out of season, and we somehow have them grown, which we know is from like all the technology, because there is good things that come out of it, right? I mean, I've seen videos of people that literally get like storage containers and are in New York and are like literally growing in an environment that's like more like a dark greenhouse and not natural. I mean, not natural in the sense that it's not in the sun, but it's a way for them to get access to healthier foods. And I think part of it is this obsession with like fresh food. And now a lot of people are starting to realize, especially because of the homesteader movement, of like, to your point, there's lots of ways to preserve stuff between pickling and fermenting. The reason why I bring it up is because not only have I been trying different things and whatever, but one of the funniest things I've done lately, it's not even about plastics really, but like got sick of buying so many Ziploc bags and plastic containers. And so I just started holding on to jars. And so I don't remember, I bought some of those mason jars and stuff like that because of the pickling. But what I find myself doing a lot is like when I buy things that are like nice sized jars, I hold on to those jars and I use those instead of, constantly feeling like, oh, I need to get more containers so I can have soups and this and this and this. And I find myself trying to use dry beans more because I want to add more beans to my diet. So what I'm kind of getting at is like, I feel like we've developed this obsession with fresh food, and then it got even further when we wanted this fresh food year round. And now you kind of see people moving away from that. And a big part of that's probably because things have gotten expensive, a lot of things going on the market, yada, yada, yada. But like, it's funny because now we're reconnecting with this idea of like, no, I can go back. I mean, even, you know what, a funny one too is canned fish. It is insane how popular canned fish has gotten, but at least it's something you can lean on.
So it came back because I remember in the 70s, we bought sardines. We ate sardines. We ate so much canned fish back there, canned tuna. But now you're finding out that, again, it's high in sodium. It's not exactly the greatest thing for you, but it's out there. Now, for those people that are watching, you might say that jarring is a little expensive. Again, if you're talking about the environment, stay away from plastic bottles.
Yeah.
The water bottles, olive oil with plastic bottles. Do not buy anything in plastic. I stay away from it. So you can go to Uline, and so uline.com, and buy cases and cases for real cheap, almost $1 a jar, depending on the size that you're getting. And you get large jars, medium jars, small jars. And you can stock on these in your garage or your pantry, and just always have the jars available. So when you have this, now I used to grow things in the springtime and summer. My whole entire backyard was filled with artichokes, bell pepper, zucchini, and yellow squash are the easiest to grow. And in volumes, you plant a couple seeds and it just grows wild. Grow broccoli, grow onions. I grow scallions. It's so easy to grow and put out there. And like I said, all spring and summer, I didn't have to go grocery shopping. I had my rosemary, my cilantro. All I had to do was go and buy proteins. If you're a vegetarian, just buy a few, pieces of pasta, and buy pasta that's made with semolina that's probably imported from Italy. Don't buy this regular pasta you see from the United States that's really bad for you. But it's making the right choices. So even if it's a vegetarian, I'm going to read the back of the package. Where's this pasta coming from? How is it made? And again, if it's not real semolina pasta, again, you're just feeding yourself. It's just filler. So when you think about it, when we're farming to cows, we're feeding them corn and grain to fatten them up. And that's what people don't realize. We're feeding people corn and grain and seed oils to fatten them up. And this is the stuff that we're eating out there. So when you're eating, make the right choices. If you're a vegetarian and a vegan, make the right choices. Stop eating all this ultra processed foods. But now they're addicted to it. They're addicted to snacking. They're addicted to the potato chips and all the snacks because they're hungry. They should be eating maybe 4 times a day, 5 times a day in increments, portioning it out so that they're eating healthier and they're not getting hungry because, again, there's no protein, there's no substance, there's no iron. So then again, they're just walking around, they're saying, I'm hungry again, I'm hungry again.
I think what you're hitting on more is that like a lot of us are now having to learn to eat strategically, because I know that's something that was big for me. Like, I'm kind of just going based on my personal experiences with this stuff. And for me, one of the worst things that happened was my first boss I worked with, I drank coffee all morning and drank tea in the afternoon because that's what he did. Forgot to eat all the time. One thing I found for myself is my metabolism slowed down a lot. So like something I'm having to do now is like making sure I'm eating enough. And I bring that up to say that like, even when I'm eating, like I'm definitely thinking about like, okay, like what should I be eating right now that's going to help me not have my 1 o'clock slump? Like if I am eating a lot and stuff like that. And I think that's something that beyond vegetarians, everyone can have that conversation now. Cause I feel like that is something I see happening with a lot of people, is like, how can I eat better and what can I mix into my diet rather than just focusing on making sure that I'm eating, because eating just isn't enough anymore, because you think you're eating something healthy and you're not. Like, just a perfect example, like as a swimmer in high school, we used to be like, oh, Public subs, right? Like they're filling, there's turkey, there's veggies. Like this is super healthy. It's lunch meat though, high in sodium, like not the best meat. So when you're a kid and stuff like that, it's fine. But I guess I'm just bringing up like it feels like, and it's kind of exhausting because there's this strategy behind how I have to think about food all the time now. It's not just what I eat, it's not just portion size, but it's like when I eat, I have to think about that now too. You know?
Well, that deli meat has nitrates,
Yeah.
and when I was in culinary school, we were making salami and like bologna style force meats to case from scratch, and basically there was a method of making it, so you'd have to puree the meat and chop up the pork and different types of varieties of meat. But they would do this pink curing salt. So now you can buy its pink curing salt #2. And what they did, they called it cell rolls back then. We were in high school, and you would dust 2 tablespoons, maybe to 100 pounds, in a certain amount per every batch that we were making, depending on the types of meat, even the sausages. So what happens here is when you're dusting that, that's a preservative. Now, if you ate that, it's like cyanide, you die.
Mhm.
Okay. It's that poisonous, but we're putting it in the food and we're eating it. Now, if you ever notice, there's some deli meats that are slimy and taste fake, and they're so high in sodium. And there's some that are better and more naturally made. Yes, one is a lot worse, 100 times worse than like boar's head or a nicer, healthier style deli meat, but they're still bad for you. All of them are.
So I don't trust grocery store, by the way. I saw the word water product as one of the top ingredients. And when I saw water product, I was like, I don't know what that means, but I don't like it. So I'm not going to eat it anymore.
Correct. So it's soaked in a water brine, again, that has nitrates. And
Yeah.
that's just, sugar, salt is something that helps cure. It helps stabilize it for, again, and one thing about vegetarians, what they have to understand with ultra processed foods is that they want them in the supermarkets to last long. With vegetarian food and healthy and natural food, you would expect it to go bad within 3 or 4 days. And this stuff doesn't go bad. It'll stay fresh. The cheeses and everything, the soy milks and everything else, they're staying in there for a month, 2 months, sometimes even 3. Our vegetables that we used to buy would go bad in 3 or 4 days. Now they're lasting 2, 3 weeks. You got to ask yourself why.
Yeah.
This is the food we're putting into our body, and it's pretty scary that we're all eating it. So, so I don't keep this long because this is a conversation to go on forever, Jake.
Yeah.
But what do you see that the future is taking this or taking us when it comes to fresh food versus ultra processed? Do you feel that we're going to get better at this? Are they going to regulate it better? Where's the direction? Because I don't see us taking a direction. I don't see the people. We're fighting out there over politics. They're protesting over everything else when you should be protecting your future, protecting your kids' future, your grandkids' future. And life expectancy is going to go lower and lower and lower due to health. So if it's at 85, it's going to go down to 65. It's going to go down to 55. It's going to go down to 40. And why? It's because the food that we're eating. It's not getting better because the big corporations are getting greedier. You got Coke, PepsiCo, and they're owned by BlackRock and Vanguard and whoever else. And this is the problem. The system is broken, and it's been breaking more and more and more because, again, I love eating vegetables and fruits, but when I was a kid, we would spit the seeds out of grapes, lemons, everything that we ate, watermelons, and everything smelled fresh, and you could taste the sugar inside of it naturally because it developed, and it wasn't shiny. Apples are probably one of the worst things for you to eat, actually, with the dips and the stuff that they're dipping into it and the pesticides that they put on them. It's a really bad thing to eat an apple, and that should be one of the healthiest things for you to eat. So it seems that every food that we buy, from milk to cheese to orange juice, everything is concentrated now. So whether you're vegetarian or you're not vegetarian, what is safe for you to eat, and where are we going in the future? How do we fix this? Is it fixable? Is it scalable?
I actually do think that like things are getting healthier, and I'll tell you what changed my mind was I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson has been talking about a little bit of food stuff, interesting enough, and I'm not going to go into all the stuff they said because they had a really interesting one about like processed foods and the different the different labels of like what is a processed food versus a not processed food. But when I'm going and I'm looking at ingredients, and I have to trust the label, right? So as long as those are somewhat honest, like when you mentioned the sodium for canned fish, for example, like I feel like I'm noticing that there is like a change where people are trying, like companies are willing to go back to the healthier versions, but they're charging a premium for it. And I think that's because right now, especially the way that the American economy works with these big companies swallowing smaller companies, it's kind of the golden age for them right now to be doing this kind of stuff. So like it is gaining a lot of traction, but to your point is I think people are getting burnt out, upset, and also things are, for a number of reasons, becoming unaffordable. But the bigger stress is that, like, I'm going to get political here only for a second to say that, like, to your point, you know, all these politicians are focused on like culture war items when people really only care about three things: housing, groceries, and gas. And the reason why it's really important is when they're coming to their groceries are getting more expensive, but in a lot of cases, quality is going down. Doesn't mean you're not getting access to quality, but the quality is like so much more expensive. So that's pushing people to start going more to like farmers markets and some other things like that. I think in a lot of cases, or like you said, they're growing foods at home. So I think we are starting to see this turn where people aren't just trusting the grocery store anymore or just trusting the labels and stuff like that. And so that's why I think we already are starting to see that transition where, I mean, it sucks because of the lack of trust in any bigger institution, but I mean, it's just time that people are starting to refocus on themselves. So I think that's, to your point, what we are starting to see happen. And I think with the younger generation, you're going to see a lot more of that than you have with like my generation, millennials, and as they get older and older, because people are kind of getting fed up with the whole idea of like, I'm just going to point my finger at food fraud. Like you can get away with so much when it comes to U.S. foods, and I mean U.S. companies. Because another thing I feel like is happening for me is like vegetables, like going to farmers markets and stuff has become a bigger priority for me as I move around. I do think some stores are getting better about fresh produce, like the kind that we would want to see. But as I said, it's just really, really expensive to get those things. It's like you can get this or you can get the other one. Because I was thinking about the, you know, like we said, some food might last a couple of weeks before it goes bad. Well, I know, like for me, my understanding of what happened in Florida with Publix that was really frustrating was you have all these kinds of fruits and vegetables that were grown in Florida but aren't anymore, right? Because of massive development, no more farms, whatever the reason why. And so all of a sudden, I'm putting my finger at Publix because I love Publix and I'm really upset with what's happened with them. It's like, I can't trust the produce there because it doesn't even last a day. So to your point, I do get suspicious when it lasts a couple of weeks, but then when I go to the farmer's market and I get fruits and vegetables, they do last a couple of weeks, but like that's how long the food is supposed to last. Like same thing with eggs that you were talking about. Like by the time I buy my eggs, I'm checking the what's that date called? The egg date?
Julian date.
The Julian date. I'm checking the Julian date, and I was like, so basically these eggs are 3 weeks old, so I have to eat them in the next 2 weeks to hit like that, right? You know, so I think that's what's happening. And
you seen a difference with that though on your eggs?
What's that?
Have you seen a difference with your eggs by looking at the date?
Yeah. I mean, part of it too is I flip back and forth where like sometimes I'm like, no, I need the pasture raised eggs. You know, it's like, oh, I'll pay $8 for eggs this time. But then I get like really upset that I'm paying $8 for eggs. I'm like, you know what? Eggland's $2 eggs is good enough for me. So I think it does, like, it's weird because like I am still looking at the quality, and I don't know if it's my timing when I come to the store or anything like that. But I do notice when I pay attention, it's like milk, right? Like when you catch it, it's also more that like I don't eat all the eggs right away. So for me, it's like spacing them out, if that makes sense. So I guess maybe I don't see the quality as much, but it's like, oh, I know I don't have to eat these eggs this week, and that makes me feel better.
Yeah. So what I end up doing is I buy a half dozen because I know I'm by myself.
Yeah.
I might eat, 1 week I don't even feel like eating eggs. Another week I'll run out so fast I have to run to the store, but I rather run to the store every day because there's a store left within 3 minutes from me. So I'm not worried about that. But, you know, when it comes down to trust, as you mentioned several times here, I'm having a hard time trusting what they're putting out there. Again, I'm going to go back to olive oil. All the bottles say olive oil. It all says 100%. But I do know that a majority of those oils are made with seed oils with chlorophyll. Why can't they list those ingredients properly? Why do they get away with saying this is 100% olive oil when we know it isn't? So they're lying to the public. When you go to the grocery markets where you're at the Stop and Shop or, you know, Hardee's or any of these supermarkets out here in the Midwest or East Coast, you know, it says farm fresh on the meat, and they're putting a cow on it, and they're putting a special sticker, and they'll put a gold star on it. They're manipulating the food system. How do we know that that's the best food? When I'm hearing that they're bleaching the food, they're putting red food dye on it, and they're taking the packaging off, and they're resealing it with a new date.
Yeah.
So I do have problems with trust when it comes to shopping. And I'm saying to everyone to do research, but how can you research that? Only the employees know, and sooner or later the employees are going to come out and say something about that. And this is going on from, I hear from Trader Joe's to Walmart. People are weighing different types of proteins at the supermarket, and it's it's saying 9 pounds when it's really 3 pounds. So food fraud is out there. So even if I'm a vegetarian, I don't know what to eat, what to go for, what vegetables are, you know, the best for me, that's going to give me vitamins and nutrients. So how do I move ahead in my future when you're talking about us being obese, and how do I change this? Because, well, it's one step at a time. I know that. Finding alternatives, finding better sources. What you said, farmers markets are the best place to go to eat and buy product. You get real honeycomb out there. You get pure honey. The honey that you're buying in the supermarket, get rid of it. It's not honey. It's fructose disguised as honey with caramel coloring. So go to a place that you can trust. Okay, so when you know the season's over, the season's over. They're not growing it anymore. I started seeing Costco. You know, growing up, I could only get plums and nectarines and peaches only in the summer, and it was specific, and cherries only for a couple months. And now they're year round. That's not trusting.
It's funny you say that, because it did have me thinking that, like, because obviously there's religious restrictions. So I saw some people talking about this. Like, it's funny because during Passover, you see it happen where everyone's like, hey, if you buy the yellow Coke, like, it's just sugar. There's no corn syrup in it. You can't eat corn. And this came up again because, like, halal and kosher actually, from what I'm seeing, are becoming a go-to, like, butcher shop. Like, someone in Orlando was talking about how they had gone to a halal shop because it's the only place they could get goat. But, like, all the food is like going to a real butcher and getting normal food. I mean, that's what it is, right? It's a butcher. But it's just funny because, like, actually, because of the religious traditions, like, because of how strict they are, that's where people are starting to lean more. So I feel like, for me, my advice to people on, like, what at least I'm doing for myself, I'm not saying I'm going to halal stores, and I don't have access here. Okay, I don't know what that word was. Sorry, that caught me for a second. Is like focusing on, like, where can I get these better meats? So, like, one of the most embarrassing things about living in Orlando and going to the farmer's market, by the way, I went to the farmer's market, never thought to do it. I can buy eggs from local farmers. I can buy beef, chicken, all this stuff. And you kind of mentioned, it's like, how do you check? I don't think it's a bad thing to make that part of your routine. If you're, like, for me, going to a new place, like, I do actually kind of want to see where it is. And you know what's funny? A lot of the farmers will invite you to come do it. So, like, it's not like we don't have these better options. They're there. To your point, like, yeah, it takes extra work. But also, I wouldn't want to change my entire kitchen right away either, right? There's no point in, like, throwing everything out. Like, me and my girlfriend were arguing about enriched rice because, like, we bought it because that when we went to the store, that's all there was enriched rice. And I'm, like, on this kick where I'm trying to, like, phase things out. And so I'm like, fine, you can finish the enriched rice. I'm not going to eat it. But then I'll move over to, like, this rice, which is better. You know, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't think it hurts for people to go and check things out and to build some of those local relationships. But also, don't do it at once. Do it piece by piece, because not everybody has access to that stuff. You know, like, you know, the last thing I was just say is just with the kefir, like, it's frustrating for me because I want to have, like, the really nice milk. I lived in Wichita, Kansas, where I had access to fat pasteurized milk. If you don't know what it is, it's fat on the top. It's not the best for kefir, to be honest. But the point is, like, even for the whole milk, I could get homogenized that pasteurized milk, which is like a low temperature way to do it. It's very fancy or whatever. Now I'm out on the island, like in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and, like, everything is ultra pasteurized except for the basic store-bought milk. And I'm not going to drive 2 hours to go get milk just to make kefir. If any people that don't know, you put the kefir grains in the milk, and then it kind of turns into a yogurt. So that's just, like, an example where, like, I'm making compromises, but I can still make these healthy decisions. I can still have access. You know, I can still go to the fish markets where I'm at here, and that's what I did. I went and checked some of them out, did the sniff test to see how fishy they were. So you have options.
You you have to touch the fish too.
Oh,
So
I didn't do that. I should ask to touch it. But
so
they are also local fishermen, so
yeah. Well, if you touch it, if it's firm, if you see your finger point going into it, it's soft, then you know, okay, it's not fresh. But you're funny you're saying that, because my daughter did the exact opposite. But it wasn't until I started asking her, here, I need you to help me do some research for, blogs and everything else. So I started talking to her about processed foods and what I believe, what I didn't believe in, and plastics. And within a month, she got a trash bag, threw all the Tupperware away. She threw the Pam away, because I wasn't living with her. She was just, doing all this on her own. She got rid of all the seed oils. She got rid of all that garbage, that deli meats and everything. She just refused to eat it anymore. If it wasn't avocado oil or olive oil pure, she wasn't cooking with it. She got rid of the salt. So she went after the right salt, and that's when it got really expensive for me, because now I'm online searching for the right sea salt and flake salts and that she can buy. And then she realized, okay, pink Himalayan salt isn't good for you, so I'm throwing that in the trash. So she threw hundreds and hundreds of dollars away of food. So which is great, because her mindset went straight after it, and she says, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this in little pieces. I'm going to do this all at once, and she did it all at once.
So it's good. I think it's just hard for like a lot, because I'm just saying I'm not like that. Like if I do that, I'm gonna end up going back to things like Oreos, And by the way, quick funny story about Oreos. There's so little cocoa in Oreos. My dog, I don't know how she found it. She found a sleeve of Oreos like 2 years ago. We freaked out. We call the poison control line, and we tell them how many Oreos she ate in her body weight, and they go, "Oh, there's not enough cocoa in there to actually kill a dog." But my point being is, like, you still get cravings, So I know for me, like, if you can do a cold turkey, I think it's great for people that can do that, But hopefully for people out there that are feeling overwhelmed by it, like, pick something impactful, Like meat is a great place, I feel like, to start. Like changing the quality of your meat is like good, because honestly, like a lot of vegetables you still get a lot of health benefits at the grocery store, as long as they're not going bad overnight,
Yeah. Well, when I'm eating vegetables, and this is what I say to a lot of vegetarians that ask me for advice, is that zucchini, I peel the skin off of them. Obviously, you're peeling carrots. Yellow squash, you're peeling the skin off of it, because you're going to peel the skin off of beets and a lot of things. But again, what you're doing is at least you're taking that layer of wax and whatever they sprayed on top of it off. And it's going to cook more evenly. It's going to taste better, because a lot of times it's just bitter anyways. It wasn't like that before. I didn't have that flavor, bitterness, and chewiness that a lot of the skin has nowadays. When you're making candy apples, there's a reason why the candy doesn't stick to the apple. You didn't have that problem years ago. Okay, so there's a reason why everything that doesn't work for us, or why we're getting sick, or why something tastes bitter, doesn't taste as good. The tomatoes are green. They just don't have that fresh, juicy flavor. When you used to bite into a tomato, it was so juicy, it would start dripping down your face. Now it doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's by, underpicking, not developing the sugars, the natural sugars. So it doesn't develop flavor. And again, we're spraying them, and the food that we're eating is so toxic. So when you're in the old school days, especially in Italy, they would take the core out of the tomato. They would cut a cross on the top of the tomato and have a pot of boiling water, and then drop the tomatoes in there for about 20 seconds, pull them out, take the skins out, and obviously shock them in water, cold water. So this way they would peel them, and then the skins were off, and they would dice them up and cook them, and you got a better flavored Italian dish with that. And that's what we need to go back to. But again, it comes to the labor and the time that we have. But one thing about life, it teaches us we always have time. We just don't make it.
It's actually funny you say that, because that's where I feel like everyone's going to now. Like when I'm watching all these homesteading videos, fermentation videos, all this different stuff, that's really is what it's coming down. I think part of what happened too is we didn't realize we knew our lifestyle was luxurious, but we're starting to finally see it, right? Like, because like these companies are hitting a point where things are getting so expensive. And I say that because like made my own mayo the other day, like, I mean, it doesn't taste as good, honestly. I prefer the store-bought stuff, but like, it was just one of those things, like you said, like, I know what's in it. It's not that hard. It's just adding one more thing. I find myself making beans. Like, we started making all sorts of different bean recipes. Like, it's not that hard to make hummus, and to your point, it's that nice break you need from technology. So
Now, if you're making mail, if you're just using a whisk to make it, that's fine. It's not
I use
gonna.
an immersion blender.
The immersion blenders always add the additional. So you would change the different types of vinegars that you have. Sometimes you have to go with the more expensive vinegar, a splash of lemon juice, cayenne pepper. And again, at the end, you can add a little Dijon to it just to give it a more flavor.
No. See, that's okay.
No. So one last thing before we finish up here. I believe that AI will help us, and hopefully it helps us because we throw away 50% of our crops, maybe a little bit more. They just stay there on the ground, and some of the farmers says if you can pick it, you can have it for free, because they don't have the people, they don't have the infrastructure to basically pick all the fruits and vegetables that are on these farms. But AI is coming up with machines now that is doing the picking. That's doing the seeding. Everything is coming down to AI. And I'm hoping in the future, this helps us. This helps us with better crops, better farming, better production. And maybe we don't need the types of pesticides that we are putting on them, and we don't have to wax them. It would be nice just to say for, the Food and Drug Administration just basically says we're banning this wax, we're banning these coatings that we're putting on the potatoes and on the vegetables. If we could ban that stuff alone, just let us have them naturally. But it almost seems like it's a preservative to make them last longer in the stores so they don't go rotten, so we don't waste as much. But again, if we're saving and we're picking up 100% of the crops versus the 50%, well, even if you threw it away in the store at 20% of it, at least we're doing better. And if you lower the prices for people, then you're going to get, your money one way or the other. I know for a fact they burn crops to offset the market. There's other political background things that are going on behind the scenes, which we have to get more involved in. And that's where I feel that American people should focus their energy on, which they are not. They rather focus it on the newspaper and CNBC and CNN, which they shouldn't. They should be focusing on a better life, as I keep reiterating myself. And, hopefully AI solves for that.
So I'm a bit more bearish, I think is the word, on AI. Like, I'm a bit more skeptical. And I think one of the reasons why I think people are going to focus more on like what we are talking about in food quality is because of things like data centers. So like the whole fight with potable water, there's actually apparently a city that's about to run out of water because of how much the data centers are burning through. I think that the cost of AI is eventually going to catch up with us. So I bring that up to say that, like, what I would actually say is take advantage of AI right now. Like, whenever I'm cooking and stuff, I'm learning cooking skills on what things should and shouldn't look like, or pulling up recipes by using, ChatGPT. I actually don't trust ChatGPT for work, and I don't trust it's hallucinating, but I do trust it to give me a French onion. I made an amazing French onion soup the other day, so it was like easy to pull those recipes together. So I do agree with you in terms of like the larger level technology where AI is going to solve for stuff, but I think we're going to see a lot of this stuff slow down. And at this time, I think it's a good time for people to leverage AI, at least in their personal lives, where it's like, treat it like your search assistant. Like, I fight with AI all the time, have little brainstorming conversations and stuff, which is nice. But a lot of times I'm actually asking it for research. I'm like, hey, can you help me figure out how to pick the best? I mean, things like, one thing I'm not familiar with, for example, that I caught myself on was guava. Like, they had these little Mexican guava at Costco, and I got really excited because I never had guava before. I've had a unripe guava in Costa Rica one time. It was like the only bad fruit I ever had in Costa Rica. So I get it, having a conversation with AI about it. So I was like, hey, like, I'm not really sure what this is supposed to taste like. And it's basically like, nah, that's not a ripe guava. Oh, and by the way, the guava you're eating is, to your point, a year-round grown guava. It's not like a guava, like what people are talking about when they talk about it affectionately. So like I said, not to like fully disagree. I get where I agree with you where we'll see a lot of advancements, but I think as the cost of AI catches up, that's going to slow things down. And part of that slowdown is going to be the fact that, like, we're all in fights with data centers. I say that because Florida's got a few different locations it's fight. So as people are focusing on things like potable water, you're going to see a lot of the attention refocusing into community-based stuff. But like, we, to your point, need to do that as a people. Like, we have to stand up and do this, because when you look at the people above you that are making these decisions, like, a lot of, I don't know how to say this politely, you can have people elected that don't have the background to make some of these big decisions. So we as a group have to start making these decisions by not just voting with our dollar, but like actively pushing some of these things that we want. Like
Here's
that's good.
here's the biggest problem with AI. It's not regulated. They have no regulations on any of it. And it's going to push so fast, and people are desperate to solve for problems that we have, such as labor problems across the United States. So there's going to have to be some kind of reset at one point.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to regulate everything, what it's allowed to do, they're going to have to retrain. They're going to have to teach people how to build. So it's going to take over a lot of jobs, but they're going to have to reset to have people find other work within that industry to make that machinery, to clean it, to maintain it, all that stuff. So it's going to be a big reset, but we're not going to get anywhere without some regulations. And that's going to be the biggest issue right there. And that's where government comes in. So yeah, governments are making rules and laws and allowing this stuff in. It's only because the multi-trillion-dollar companies out there are the ones that can afford it and are implementing it. So they find their ways of making things for cheaper and mass producing them, which is going to benefit their pockets. Has nothing to do with the American people. Now, the American people have to get out there and either vote, help create bills, do a lot of things out there to make sure all this stuff gets regulated so it's not hurting the people.
Yeah, I mean, but I do think that's going to happen somewhat naturally, because the weirdest thing that gave me the confidence and what you're saying, where I think it is going to start coming out, where people start pushing back, is I think it was, what's his name? Jon Stewart had that show on Apple where he like went and talked with an oil exec, and he's like, why aren't you guys focused on electric cars and renewable energy? And he's like, we are. We're just researching it right now, though. Like, we don't have a way to replace all this oil and stuff like that. Like, if we did, don't you think we'd be doing that? It's super profitable for us to move into renewable energy. And I think that's where a lot of the American people are feeling left behind, because like food fraud, and I say that because it's weird for me to say this because I lean a little bit more left, but like the government does suck at regulating stuff, right? Like we see that with the FDA, we see it in the other stuff. So I agree with you where I think we're going to start seeing it kick in, but I think we have to go a little bit longer with this, with the hype cycle of these AI guys. I say that because like Anthropic, I'm going to throw this out there real quick, is doing a really good job right now where they're telling everyone they're going to lose their job every 6 months. They keep moving the line back every 6 months. They're not even bumping up the prices of AI. They're trying, everyone's managing the price right now, but they're removing features, they're removing models, they're using models that absorb more tokens. Like, it hits that non-sustainable trajectory of where it's gonna hit a wall and everything's gonna reset. And I think that is the point that you're talking about, is people are gonna get fed up. I don't think the government's gonna regulate fast enough. I think people are gonna get fed up. They're gonna push back really, really hard, and that's where you're gonna have to see a lot of these bigger companies take a step back. Because if they don't, worse things are going to happen, but I don't think anyone's going to let it get to that level. So,
well, it is in a sense, because every time they regulate something, they say, okay, this is going to get regulated. You have 2 years, like number 2 red dye. Okay. So you're still seeing it in the food. You still see it in the can. It's not going away, but they said, okay, you have into 2028, for example. But in the meantime, you have somebody else that's on a committee that comes and creates a bill or a lawsuit and says, we're going to fight this. We're going to sue you. We're going to take this to court. And that's where these regulations, excuse my language, go to shit. Because there's a lot of them out there. Because who's going to benefit from making sure this doesn't go through? Because how much money are they going to have to change their brand, change the product, change the recipe, train people, because they rely on that product. It's a necessity for them, because when they're making ground beef or they're making something, are they putting red food dye in it? I mean, you got to ask yourself, what are they putting in our food again? And the people that make the red dye, they're going out of business. So it's several layers of it. So they don't want this to pass. And this is only one little product. Yeah. And again, why can't we just regulate it? Okay, you have 1 month, it's against the law. Done. Well, it doesn't that easy.
I think just to piggyback off what you're talking about too, like, you don't want to get to the point where you have a younger, more liberal generation that comes in and pushes really hard the other way. Because that's really going to make things, and that's one of the predictions people are making right now, is that younger generations are staying, they're leaning really hard, more liberal. We don't want to see that kind of overcorrection, like no matter what side of the aisle you're on. Because kind of to your point, I guess, because the thing that bothers me with that too, with the red dye, is like, you know, it's like, oh, well, we're just trying to make it look a little bit better so we can sell it. So it's marketing. It's like, you don't want to be in an environment where things are going to be like hyper regulated, you know? So I think that's one of the things that I hope kind of catches up, because with the red dye thing, like to your point, I guess one of the things that I'm going to actually take a quick step to a different angle on this. I was watching a video where a guy was talking about American food and legitimate food fraud problems in America, right? But what's also really funny is we talk about how all these other countries, oh, there's all this stuff that's illegal because of American food. And it's like, okay, but apparently they also have things that we make illegal too, you know? So it's like, it's not even just us, it's the entire industrialized world is trying to figure out how far are we going to let people kind of manipulate our food before it's not okay. And that's where I'm kind of saying, like, you don't want a younger generation that has less experience and a bit more liberal to come in and be like, that's it, we're getting rid of all the chemicals, because it will create a really big mess, I think.
Well, if they're doing it in other countries, why can't we do it here? I mean, are these $1 billion? I mean, we're not. You don't see Europe saying we imported this from the United States. You always see the United States. We imported this from Italy. We imported this from Greece and Germany. You don't see that, and you know, when you travel. When I was in Ireland, I don't see things from America over there. They don't care. You know, the
they
food,
just say American style.
I did not see any Heinz ketchup. In fact, the ketchup, you could taste pure cane sugar in it. It was a lot sweeter when it's overseas. Yeah. So, you know, you have to say something here that, you know, the power goes back to the people, as they said for decades. Back in the 60s, it started, I believe. I don't know when it started, but, you know, the people have the power. They showed it with Budweiser. That their sales dropped $25,000 or $25 million. I'm sorry. So when the people say we've had enough and stop buying anything with red dye in it, so no more red velvet cakes, no more red lollipops, you just leave them on the shelves, let them go bad.
Yeah.
Okay? You have the power to control their buying power and what they're selling.
I do think, though, with the Budweiser thing, though, it was more of a cultural issue. And that's kind of what sucks, is like, that is where our attention still is. So I guess the question is, where does that start to bridge where it's more about quality of life? And you know what will probably happen, I think where you were right earlier, is when that life expectancy finally does drop a big enough amount, because it already did drop, right? Like, I think we tapped out at like maybe the average American living to be about 83 or 82. And it started to go back down, not massively, right? It's just down to 81. So I think where you're right is like, once you start hitting like 76, 75, like people are going to start looking around being like, what's going on? Like, this is not a good thing, you know? Because the Neil deGrasse Tyson thing that I brought up earlier, it was the fascinating thing he said about organic food is he's like, people ate organic for thousands, if not millions of years. And from the recordings we've seen, like over a couple thousand years, people went from living 30 years old to 50 years old, and they ate organic the whole time. So it's not like organic food just solves all this stuff. There is other elements where, you know, there are processes and medicines that make things better because we got to the point that we're living longer. But, you know, like, I guess where's that line is kind of that's what had me questioning the other day. You know, like, how far should we really be taking it? And when will everyone start paying attention to say, like, hey, this isn't a good excuse. Like, we don't want to eat Soylent Green. Sorry, we don't want to just sit here and drink a milkshake or whatever it is, like this nondescript food. So
when are they going to start? I would say when it's too late, but I think it's too late now in my eyes, because I'm around food. I know more about food than the average person.
Yeah.
I say it's too late now, but unfortunately, you know, the media, the government, everyone else is going to camouflage what's really going on. They're not going to really list what that person died of. They're going to say, this person died of natural causes. This person died of cancer. This person was born with autism. Well, why don't you read the results of how much autism has increased over the last 30, 40, 10 years in increments? Why don't you talk about cancer? How we've always had cancer since the early 1900s, probably in the 18s and so on. But why don't you give a chart on how it's grown and increased? And any of those charts manipulated? Because I know they manipulated a lot of their studies and a lot of their charts. But we need a factual, true chart discussing all this and showing it all, because that's going to show you that it's too late.
Yeah. Well, I do just want to throw out there too, like maybe the question is, maybe we just don't have enough data. I mean, when you think about it, 100 years seems like a long time, but is it really? I mean, Coca-Cola was literally made over 100 years ago, So like, as part of this question, like, because of when we start recording, where's that line where they start to say, hey, this is a real growth, or was this always there? And I'm just bringing up, like, I know that's one of the criticisms of the whole thing is just like, was there always autism when we just didn't know because we didn't diagnose it, So was there actual growth, or is this happening because of changes in our food, our behavior, like technology? Like, I'm a big believer that everyone is getting ADHD, and I'm not saying there isn't. There is a legitimate ADHD, but there is also kind of like a psychological thing happening when you interact with technology. I say that because, like, ghost leg is a thing, right? Ghost vibrations. I'm sure you've heard of those, where like you reach into your left pocket because you feel your leg vibrating, but your phone is in your right pocket. Like, that's all trained, right? This constant fight for attention. So I do wonder if they'll be able to kind of communicate, like, hey, this is where the line is. Like, we have enough data. This is real growth. This is not real growth, that kind of thing.
True, because I don't think half the people knew back then what autism was. It was a lot of people, they said, okay, he or she had a learning disorder. They didn't identify it quick enough. But growing up, I remember seeing a lot of people with Down syndrome. And every time you turn around, there's somebody in the street with Down syndrome. And I don't see so much on the Down syndrome anymore. I see a lot more autism. And it's every other person I know. One lady had 2 kids with Down syndrome. With autism. And then every time I turn around, and the schools are filled with classrooms now with autistic kids. And there's programs for autistic kids all over the United States. It's huge.
Yeah.
So I think you see it there, but it's more visible now than it was ever before, which basically is saying that if you look at the studies, let's just say 1 in every 5 or 1 in every 10 families have an autistic kid.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get those studies out, versus in the old days, it might have been 1 in 100.
Yeah.
But we do need that data, and it needs to be brought out to the American people. But again, we're not focused on that, and there are private companies that do that. But again, it takes money. So there you go. I mean, these are the things that we need to fight over, versus stupid things that we're fighting over right now. Again, to make the world a better place to live, to make it better for your families and everyone else in the future. But again, it's not happening. And there are those there's the exception to the rule that are doing it. I think we do have and not through AI, but AI can help. But I think we do have the resources to get this data.
Yeah. I mean, it'll definitely help, because they'll be able to scrape, maybe even see things in mass that we like. It would help us to identify patterns better, for sure.
Or they do not want us to see it.
I mean, that part too, and I think that's where it's important. We were talking about the other day. I haven't done it yet, but like, because if you remember, we were looking at the New Mexican health report, and it literally goes back like 60, 70 years. And it's just like, how do we consume this data without having to spend an immense amount of time just to be able to pick up patterns? It's like, I can just drop this in any number of different AI platforms and ask it questions, and it can kind of help me coordinate. And of course, I'm heavily relying on that, right? Unless I sit there and double check the numbers. But once again, I think that's one of the many places where AI is going to help. Because I think the other thing I'd like to see coming out of our podcast from watchers is the stuff that we're talking about is like changing. Hopefully over time, people's focus is going to change when they talk about politics and the different things of like, where AI can kind of help is like, pull the raw data and start taking a look and look at the patterns. Like you said, I mean, if there's health reports, or more importantly, like, how can we pay more attention to our food? I hope people take that away from what we're talking about, not just like, oh, are vegetarians less healthy? It's like, okay, but like, how is this part of that larger trend, and where should we be refocusing? you know, because I think where everyone agrees on is like a lot of Americans are struggling because our needs are not being prioritized. We kind of have to prioritize them ourselves and vote with our dollar that way.
Yeah, cause, effect, solution. And that's what we need to come up with now. You know, what I learned a long time ago by going to seminars, self-improvement seminars, is that you create a list of 3 things that you need to get done. And every day you focus on what did you do to accomplish that list. Every day you go down that list. And so one day, even if you looked up on the internet a phone number to contact somebody, just on that number 1, and the next day you made that phone call, the next day you made a plan. Every day you did something you did, because it could take 30 seconds, 1 minute to write something down. Every day. You're on your lunch break. Instead of watching YouTube videos and Instagram stuff, cut that in half and do something on there. And then that's where your journey starts.
Yeah.